This is Denise, and I'm here with Dan Pilla for today's Tax Help Minute, and we're going to talk about penalties today. So, tax penalties, are those a big deal?
Well, penalties are a big deal. First of all, there's over 140 different penalty provisions in the tax code, so the IRS can penalize you for, everything from soup to nuts and everything in between, no question about that. But the other thing is the number of penalties that the IRS issues. The sheer number of penalties has been growing exponentially over the last couple of years. For example, in 2012, the last year that we've got current data for, the IRS issued over 37 million penalties against individuals and businesses, and there was only 140 million personal tax returns filed. So, I mean, we're talking about almost 1 out of every 3 people that's hit with some kind of penalty, and most of the penalties that the IRS assesses are what they call delinquency penalties: failure to file, failure to pay, failure to make the proper estimated tax payments. For businesses, the penalties are very, very commonly assessed against employment taxes. And again, it's failure to file the employment tax returns, failure to deposit the employment tax revenue. So these kind of delinquency penalties are a huge deal.
You have this book, The IRS Problem Solver, and in that book you talk about penalties and the fact that they can be removed. So how do you do that? How does that work?
I do. I've been focusing on penalties, Denise, for a long time, and I've helped thousands of people across the country deal with penalty problems. Here's what the IRS doesn't tell you. Every single penalty provision of the tax code has what's called a good faith or reasonable cause provision. And what that means very simply is if you acted in good faith and based on a reasonable cause for your actions, and you didn't deliberately disregard IRS rules and regulations, the penalties don't apply. Where people get caught up is that the IRS will automatically add these penalties to any delinquent tax bill. You see, because the IRS doesn't have to prove that the penalty applies in your case, you have to prove that it does not apply. Okay. They don't tell you about these exceptions, and they don't tell you how to utilize the exceptions. But in the book, The IRS Problem Solver, I take you step by step through the process of dealing with penalties. I show you what constitutes a reasonable cause, how to make a reasonable cause presentation to the IRS. If the IRS says no on the front end, which often they do, I show you how to appeal that so you can get another look at your case. You can get somebody else to review it to make sure that it's correct. But in a situation like that where you've got facts to establish that you didn't deliberately disregard the rules, you can get these penalties canceled.
What are the odds? Are they 50-50, greater than that?
Well, the odds, I mean, it depends on the facts and circumstances of the case, but I can tell you this, under the right circumstances, you got much better than a 50-50 chance, probably 80-85% chance that the IRS is going to cancel the penalties. But it's even better than that because the IRS also has what they call a first-time abate policy, which means that if you never had any problems with the IRS in the past, and this is the first problem that you've ever had with the IRS, or at least the first problem you've had in a window of the prior 3 years, they're automatically going to cancel the penalties. I mean, this is something that they don't tell you as well. And as a matter of fact, I've written about this at length. As a matter of fact, the Government Accountability Office that does the study, they of the IRS and the government agencies, they have reported that over 90% of the people who qualify for the first-time abate policy don't get their abatement unless they ask for it. Really? So in other words, the IRS isn't going to do you the favor. You've got to go in there and ask for it. You've got to know what your rights are, and when you do, you're going to win your case.
So what about the interest on those penalties?
Well, what happens is there's interest on the tax and there's interest on the penalties. Now, when the IRS cancels the penalties, they'll cancel the interest on the penalties as well. That'll leave the tax and the interest on the tax.
And where do we get more information?
All right, more information is available from my book. The book is called The IRS Problem Solver. This book was ranked by the Wall Street Journal as the #1 tax book in America. It's available on my website, taxhelponline.com. That's taxhelponline.com. Or you can call my office, 1-800-34-NO-TAX. That's 800-34-NOTAX.